The studio lights buzzed softly overhead as the audience roared with excitement, their applause echoing across the sleek, polished set of The View. The camera panned to Joy Behar, clad in her signature bold frames, as she flashed her bright stage smile and leaned forward with casual charm. "Ladies and gentlemen," she purred into the mic, "the man of a million characters, the pirate with a poet's soul, please welcome Johnny Depp." The crowd exploded in cheers as Johnny strode in with his usual nonchalant swaggerings, glittering scarf flowing, a cigarette-shaped lollipop between his teeth. Thank you," he murmured, waving to the audience before sitting opposite Joy at the center of the table. His voice, soft and smoky, carried that elusive magnetism. The co-hosts joined in with easy laughter, throwing light jabs and nostalgic nods to Johnny's filmography. He responded playfully, offering dry wit about Jack Sparrow's eyeliner being a lifestyle choice and teasing his guitar collection. For a while, it was smooth sailing celebrity charm, meeting seasoned talk show cadence. But about 12 minutes in, Joy leaned back in her chair, her tone shifting almost imperceptibly. "Johnny," she began, feigning innocence, "you've played so many roles, but in real life, some would say you've played the victim more than the hero." The air thickened, and a curious hush spread across the panel. Johnny's smile faded only slightly, his eyes narrowing just enough to register the change in temperature. "That's an interesting way to put it," he replied coolly. Sunny glanced between them, lips pursed, perhaps sensing a riptide forming. Joy pressed on. "I mean the whole court thing, you know what I'm talking about. There are still people who think that trial wasn't about truth but about PR." Johnny's jaw stiffened as he adjusted the silver rings on his fingers. "You mean the trial that was broadcast to the entire planet?" he said, voice low and deliberate. "Where I laid bare everything I'd kept silent for years." The tension was visible now, like static before a lightning strike. Sarah N. tried to lighten the moment. "Well, nobody can deny it was dramatic, almost like a movie." She chuckled, but her attempt fell flat as Johnny turned toward Joy, his voice gaining edge. "You invited me here to discuss art, films, music, not to rehash pain dressed up as ratings bait." Joy raised her eyebrows but didn't back down. "But Johnny, don't you think public figures have a responsibility to address public controversies?" He laughed, short and humorless. "There's a difference between accountability and crucifixion." Joy. The audience had grown uncomfortably quiet. Even the usual panel energy giggling co-hosts. Audience whispers had drained out, replaced by a kind of anticipatory dread. The director, off-camera, whispered cues frantically into headsets, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it play out. Joy, ever the provocateur, leaned in closer. "While some might argue that playing misunderstood is your most consistent role, that did it." Johnny sat up straighter, his easy posture replaced by a coiled tension. "You know what's fascinating, Joy," he said, voice steady but deadly quiet. "You sit here, protected by lighting and cue cards, tossing barbs at people whose lives you only know through headlines. But you weren't there. You didn't hear the recordings. You didn't see the evidence. You didn't live it." Joy opened her mouth, but he cut her off, his voice rising. "I did. I lived every goddamn second of it. And I've had to rebuild career, family, reputation while people like you sip lattes and sneer from a studio chair." Sunny interjected gently. "Let's not escalate." But it was too late. Johnny stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the studio floor. "You invited me here under the guise of respect, but clearly, you wanted a spectacle." He pulled off his mic and dropped it on the table. "Well, congratulations, you got your clip." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Joy tried to regain control. "Johnny, sit down, we're just having a conversation." But he was already walking, his boots thudding with finality on the studio floor as he made his way toward the curtain. The camera struggled to follow him as he exited the set. A lone stagehand frozen off to the side. The audience erupted not into cheers or boos, but stunned, murmuring disbelief. The panel sat in silence for a beat too long, trying to process what had just happened. Who would speak first? Who would spin it? Joy, always the professional, finally turned to the camera. "Well, that was unexpected." Her tone was flat, almost amused, but her eyes flickered with something unreadable regret, perhaps, or just the chill of miscalculation. Sunny shifted in her seat. "It's a reminder that trauma isn't performance," she said quietly, more to herself than the camera. Joy raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. The crew motioned for a break, and the theme music stuttered to life, like a needle skipping on vinyl. Backstage, the producer jogged after Johnny, who was already pulling off the last pieces of wardrobe. "Mr. Depp, we can smooth this over, maybe, do a follow-up." "No," Johnny said, eyes blazing. "You don't get to bait me into vulnerability and then package it as content." The hallway buzzed with frantic assistants and whispering interns, but Johnny walked straight through them like a man escaping a burning room. Outside, paparazzi already stirred, alerted by someone inside. As he stepped into a waiting SUV, the door slammed like the final chord of a rock ballad's Dune, loud and echoing. Back in the studio, the panel tried to regroup. Whoopi Goldberg, who had stayed noticeably silent during the segment, finally spoke. "Sometimes the truth don't fit in neat little talk show segments," she said, her voice gravelly. "Sometimes people just break." The audience clapped, half-heartedly, unsure whether they were endorsing the comment or simply applauding the end of discomfort. Joy turned to the camera one last time. "We'll be right back," she said, the smile back in place but her voice missing its usual bite. The screen faded to commercial just as a new trending topic blazed across the internet. #Depp on The View. The internet didn't take long to catch fire. Within minutes, clips of the altercation were circulating across social media like digital wildfire. One 15-second snippet: Johnny's icy congratulations. You got your clip head already. Hit 1 million views. TikTokers stitched it with reaction faces. Podcast hosts rewound the audio with theatrical gasps. And Twitter was a war zone of divided opinion. On one side, die-hard Depp fans hailed his exit as a stand for integrity, turning him into a trending hero. On the other, critics accused him of being unable to handle accountability, reigniting debates around the trial, Hollywood power, and media manipulation. The View's official account posted a carefully worded statement. "We support honest dialogue, Evan, when it gets uncomfortable. Today's conversation was passionate, and we respect all our guests' perspectives." But the replies were merciless. "You ambushed him. Disrespectful. This is why no real artists do daytime shows anymore." The backlash was unrelenting, each thread unraveling deeper tensions between celebrity privacy and public expectation. Meanwhile, back at the network, executives scrambled. The episode had been scheduled to rerun over the weekend. But now, internal meetings buzzed about whether to re-edit, censor, or double down. One producer suggested framing the moment as a powerful example of raw emotion on live TV. Another wanted to issue a quiet apology to Johnny's team, hoping to repair the relationship before he canceled future appearances on affiliated shows. Joy Behar, for her part, remained unapologetic. In a leaked backstage clip, she was overheard saying, "He can walk off all he wants, but if he didn't want tough questions, he should have stayed in his castle." Others on the panel were less convinced. Sunny Hostin reportedly confided to a producer that she felt sick after the taping. Even Whoopi was seen leaving without speaking to anyone, her brow furrowed in something between reflection and resignation. The atmosphere behind the cameras was thick with consequence. That night, Johnny released a rare statement through his publicist. It read, "In part, I came to speak about my work, my art, and my creative journey. I was met instead with provocation, masquerading as journalism. I won't participate in hollow spectacles. My truth is not for sale." The message, terse but elegant, was reposted millions of times. His peers in the industry weighed in subtly tweeted cryptic lines about dignity. And fellow actors reposted black and white photos of Johnny with captions like "Let artists be." Notably, a few of his past co-stars, who had remained silent during earlier controversies, now spoke up in support. "Johnny's been through hell and still shows up with grace." One actress posted, "Shame on those who profit from reopening wounds." Suddenly, the event wasn't just a walk-off, it was a cultural flashpoint. By the next morning, the segment had become the top story on nearly every entertainment site. Editorials sprang up, dissecting every facial expression, body posture, and breath between Johnny and Joy. Body language experts were invited onto morning news shows to analyze the microaggressions and emotional boundaries crossed. Think pieces emerged, debating whether daytime television was exploiting trauma under the guise of candid conversation. At a press breakfast, Joy doubled down. "Look, I ask questions. That's my job. If a guest doesn't like them, maybe they're not ready to talk." But the comment only stoked the fire. Headlines quickly reframed it as dismissive and condescending. Former guests of The View came forward with their own stories of being blindsided, amplifying a wider narrative that perhaps the show had gone from bold to belligerent. The public reaction wasn't just digital, it began affecting the network itself. Advertisers started pulling spots from the re-airing of the episode, citing brand alignment concerns. Protesters appeared outside ABC's headquarters with signs reading "Trauma isn't television" and "Depp deserved dignity." Inside industry circles, a whisper began. Was The View finally burning out? Was the formula sharp-tongued hosts and unfiltered confrontations reaching its expiration point? Behind closed doors, the network debated giving Joy a temporary break, but she refused. "If I go now," she reportedly said, "they'll make it look like I was wrong." But pressure was mounting, and even loyal viewers were beginning to feel that a line had been crossed. This wasn't just an awkward moment on live TV, this felt pivotal. At Johnny's end, however, something quietly transformed. He had gone dark after the incident, retreating to a private estate in France. But then, just 5 days later, a surprise clip surfaced online: Johnny in a dimly lit studio, strumming a slow, moody acoustic riff on guitar. The caption read only, "When words fail, music remains." It wasn't linked to any album, tours, or promotion. Just art for art's sake. Within hours, the internet latched onto it as a symbol of creative resilience. Fans flooded the comments. This is how you respond with soul. No PR campaign. Just truth in music. The clip was raw, unscripted, and utterly answered to the manufactured tension he had just endured. His silence said more than Joy's entire segment ever could. In the days that followed, the story refused to die down. Rather than fading like most viral moments, the incident evolved, stretched, and twisted across narratives in every media corner. Streaming services debated pulling old The View episodes from recommendation lists due to the overwhelming flood of negative sentiment. Late-night comedians poked fun at the chaos, but even their punchlines carried an unusual edge, less satire, more a cautionary undertone. One joked, "When Johnny Depp walks off, you don't chase him, you follow silently and hope he lets you back in." Parody skits emerged, yes, but so did more serious conversations about how talk shows blurred the line between commentary and cruelty, between openness and ambush. A few media outlets even turned the lens inward, questioning how far journalism could go under the guise of tough questions before becoming predatory. And in this discourse, one question echoed louder than the rest. Was this the end of the untouchable daytime format? As speculation simmered, Joy Behar recorded a solo segment from the empty View set. No audience, no co-hosts, just her, a single camera, and her signature candor. "We push boundaries on this show," she began. "Sometimes too far. Sometimes not far enough. But I will never apologize for asking questions people are afraid to ask." She didn't mention Johnny's name once, but the implication was unmistakable. The segment aired without commercial interruption, and though it was meant to offer closure, it felt more like gasoline on smoldering embers. Critics labeled it performative defiance. Fans of the show defended it as unapologetically Joy, but neutral observers saw something else entirely, battled not between personalities, but ideologies. Vulnerability versus spectacle, depth versus exposure, conversation versus confrontation. And then, just as the news cycle began showing signs of fatigue, Johnny appeared again, not on television, not through a publicist, but at a small music venue in New Orleans. A surprise performance, no banners, no press invites, just word of mouth that rippled like thunder. The venue, dimly lit and packed shoulder to shoulder, was electric with reverence. Johnny walked onto the stage with his guitar and a single sentence, no edits, no scripts, just a little truth. What followed was 45 minutes of stripped-down covers, raw originals, and meandering stories that bled poetry between the lines. He didn't name names, didn't offer explanations, but everyone in the room understood. He wasn't escaping. He was reclaiming. Clips from that night went viral almost instantly, but this time, the internet responded differently. The tone had shifted from outrage to reverence. Suddenly, Johnny wasn't just a celebrity embroiled in controversy. He was a symbol of artistic resistance against a culture that chews up emotion and spits out content. News anchors commented on his reinvention. Thinkers debated whether society had become too addicted to emotional spectacle. The View's ratings dipped slightly in the aftermath, not catastrophic, but noticeable. Sponsors returned, but more cautiously. Meanwhile, Joy continued to host unbothered on the surface, but her tone sharpened. There was less laughter in her voice, a new kind of steel in her questions. Something in her had changed, too, whether she admitted it or not. In Hollywood, a silence settled. Publicists became warier about booking clients on high-profile panels. Agents began requesting pre-interview topic approvals. Guests who once craved airtime now hesitated, fearful of becoming the next viral clip, the next hashtag, the next casualty in the name of keeping it real. A ripple effect had begun, quietly but unmistakably, and all of it traced back to that one moment when a man stood up, removed a mic, and walked off a stage, not with theatrics, but with principle. The industry was listening. So was the world. No apology ever came from The View. No follow-up interview with Johnny. No dramatic reunion, no Oprah-style resolution. Just echoes, clips of his words looping endlessly on social media. Freeze frames of Joy's surprised face. Thousands of essays, reactions, duets, and stitches, all trying to make sense of a moment that was too raw to categorize. It hadn't been PR, it hadn't been planned. It was simply human, and that perhaps was why it hit so hard. In an era when so much felt manufactured, this had been real, and that reality refused to fade. And so, the set lights dimmed, the hashtags cooled. The debates drifted into background noise, but the moment remained, etched not in any script, but in the shared, cultural memory of those who witnessed it live. Whether you stood with Joy or Johnny, admired the question or the silence that followed, one thing was clear: something irreversible had happened, a threshold had been crossed. And somewhere, in a quiet room, lit only by vinyl crackle and the warm hum of analog gear, Johnny Depp strummed a chord, letting the sound speak for what words never could.